We stand at a crucial moment in American governance, where the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches is being re-examined. Former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo has provided an insightful analysis of President Donald Trump's efforts to restore the original powers of the presidency. This initiative is not merely a political maneuver but a fundamental realignment of executive authority in accordance with historical precedent and constitutional principles.
So there is now the administration, the question as to whether or not they can fire a number of government employees. We've heard that they have legal protections and you just can't do it, but the administration seems to be doing it. So what's going on there?
Rich, great to be with you. The way to understand what's happening is that President Trump is trying to restore the original powers of the presidency. And one of the most important powers is protecting the national security and foreign affairs. Presidents from Thomas Jefferson all the way through Richard Nixon, and this is when the decline of the presidency started, have always been able to not spend money if it harms our foreign policy and national security. So President Trump, I think, is within his rights to say, Congress can't force me to give money abroad if it hurts the national security of the United States. We're not going to, suppose Congress said, give money to Tehran, give money to China, give money to Russia. I think President Trump, building on the historical precedents of his predecessors, we're able to say, no, I'm not going to hurt the national security of the United States. So I think he can shut down USAID. Plus, one other thing with USAID, it turns out that it looks like the employees of USAID defied direct presidential orders to stop shoving money out the door while there was a pause to take a look and see what they were up to. I think the president is trying to restore control of the executive branch too, and he's allowed, I think, to dismiss employees who defy presidential orders.
What about the creation of these agencies? USAID, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Department of Education. These are all entities that Congress created, signed into law by the then President of the United States. Wouldn't it then take another law to get rid of those agencies?
That's a great question, Rich. And I think that's where Congress's powers go. Congress can create the agencies. Congress can give them missions. It can give them employees and it can give them money. But they can't force the president to do unconstitutional things. For example, as might be going on Department of Education, Congress can't say, give money for racial diversity programs. If the president thinks, like Abraham Lincoln did, that's unconstitutional. I don't think that Congress can force the president to manage agencies ineffectively and inefficiently. What if President Trump says, I can build a bridge for $500 million, and Congress says, no, waste money and spend $1 billion? I think the president has the ability, with all the examples you gave, to run the executive branch in an efficient, effective way and return the money to the taxpayers. Remember, this is all taxpayer dollars, and this is a fight between a Congress that wants to waste money and a president that's trying to save money.
And the Constitution gives Congress the power of the purse strings. Do you think a court would then say, hey, this is something that is the prerogative of the executive?
No, I don't think that the president has the power of the purse. You're quite right, Rich. Only Congress can make appropriations. If Congress gives a direct order, you must spend this money on, say, this university or building this bridge, and they force the president to do it, ultimately they can. Now, the thing is, here's where I get worried. The courts, I don't know if they should be getting involved in the middle of this, whether courts should be interfering with the president's effort to control everyone who works in the executive branch, who, under the Constitution and Supreme Court precedent, report to and work only for the president, and a Congress that's trying to, as you just described, Rich, try to create control over what the executive branch does, trying to interfere with the president's control over the agencies. If you want to impeach President Trump for that, Congress can. But the courts might be treading on dangerous grounds if they try to insert themselves into this fight. And these are fights that have been going on since George Washington all to the way to today.
What do you make about the executive order on birthright citizenship that's already gone to the court system? Do you think that the president has the power to narrow what birthright citizenship is?
Again, this is another example of the interplay between the president, the Congress, and the courts. Right now, the law is, and I think the lower courts are all going to strike down President Trump's order because Supreme Court precedent, I think, clearly says the Constitution requires birthright citizenship. But President Trump is allowed to say, I have a different view of the Constitution, and I'm going to try to trigger a challenge to the Supreme Court and try to get the Supreme Court, try to persuade it to change its mind. Now, actually, if you looked at President Trump's press conference on this, he expressed doubt himself about whether he was going to win on this. I actually think of all the executive orders I've looked at, and I've tried to look at most of them, I think this is the one that he's most likely to lose on, even though he's very strong. I'd say 90% of the other ones.
Okay. John, you, the former U.S. Deputy Assistant Attorney General, thank you so much for joining us this morning or this afternoon. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Rich. Go Eagles.
For centuries, from Thomas Jefferson to Richard Nixon, presidents have exercised discretion over federal spending and agency oversight to protect national security and maintain efficiency. President Trump's recent actions aim to reaffirm these responsibilities by ensuring that executive branch agencies operate in alignment with his administration's priorities. The president has the authority to withhold funds from programs that compromise national security or defy the executive branch's directives. This is particularly relevant in cases like USAID, where reports indicate that employees resisted direct presidential orders, raising concerns about bureaucratic overreach. A key argument in favor of President Trump's stance is that Congress cannot force the president to take actions that he deems unconstitutional or detrimental to the nation's security. While Congress holds the power of the purse, the president has the right to determine how funds are administered in a manner that serves the best interests of the United States. If a directive from Congress requires actions that contradict national security concerns, historical precedent suggests the president has the right to challenge and refuse such mandates. For example, if Congress were to allocate taxpayer funds to foreign entities that could pose a risk to American interests, it is the president's prerogative to block such expenditures. The assertion of this authority is not a power grab but a restoration of executive decision-making that has eroded over time due to increasing congressional oversight. To further re-establish presidential authority, the Trump administration has implemented several key executive actions. Restructuring federal agencies, over 200 executive actions have been signed, addressing border security, energy independence, and fiscal responsibility. This includes streamlining government operations to eliminate inefficiencies and redirect resources toward critical national interests. Eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives, the administration has launched the Restoring America's Fighting Force Task Force, which aims to remove DEI offices within the Department of Defense. This decision underscores a return to merit-based principles in military leadership and operational readiness. Revoking last-minute labor agreements. To prevent unnecessary constraints on federal agencies, the administration has overturned collective bargaining agreements enacted during the final days of the previous administration. This move ensures that government reforms remain unimpeded by bureaucratic entanglements. While these actions have been met with criticism, they reflect a broader discussion on the role of executive power. The tension between the president and Congress is not new. It has been a defining feature of American democracy since its inception. However, when Congress seeks to dictate the precise management of executive agencies, it oversteps its constitutional role. The courts must tread carefully in adjudicating these disputes, as excessive judicial intervention could set a dangerous precedent for the separation of powers. One of the most contentious issues is President Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship. While current Supreme Court precedent supports birthright citizenship, the president has the right to challenge legal interpretations and seek a review of existing judicial rulings. As John Yoo noted, the likelihood of success in this case is low, but it underscores the president's commitment to testing constitutional boundaries in pursuit of his administration's objectives. The implications of this struggle over executive authority extend far beyond the current administration. At stake is the fundamental question of how much control the president should exert over the agencies that serve under his leadership. Supporters argue that restoring strong executive oversight will enhance efficiency, reduce waste, and ensure that government institutions remain accountable to the American people. Critics, on the other hand, fear that such authority could weaken the system of checks and balances. However, history has shown that an overly constrained executive branch leads to inefficiencies and bureaucratic stagnation. A president must have the ability to govern decisively, particularly in matters of national security and foreign policy. The recent actions taken by President Trump reflect a necessary course correction, one that prioritizes constitutional governance over legislative overreach. As this debate unfolds, it is imperative that we remain engaged in the discourse surrounding the scope and limits of presidential authority. The preservation of American democracy depends on a clear and functional balance of power, one that respects both the legislative and executive branches while preventing the encroachment of one upon the other. In reaffirming the presidency's rightful powers, we take a step toward a more efficient, effective, and constitutionally sound government.